It's 1 year exactly since the Egyptian revolution started. Protesters have flocked yet again to Tahrir Square, calling this time for the next phase. But what exactly do they want, and has their revolution still not succeeded in overthrowing the old guard? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. 1 year on, and only the banners have changed. A year ago, thousands of Egyptians shocked the world when they took to Cairo's Tahrir Square. Fast forward 365 days, and the iconic square is packed again on the anniversary of the start of the uprising that toppled Hosni Mubarak. But while some celebrate, many continue to demonstrate. The slow pace of democratic reform has angered many activists, saying nothing has really changed, accusing the military of hijacking the revolution. So let's remind ourselves of what has happened in the last 365 days. Egypt held its first free and fair election in more than half a century, which saw 54% of the electorate vote. The old constitution was suspended on February the 13th. Generals prepared a package of constitutional amendments, overwhelmingly approved by a public referendum on March the 19th. Previously unthinkable, Mubarak was arrested and put on trial along with other regime officials, and his two sons all stand accused of profiteering from his position. But there's growing discontent against the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, that's the junta, who many feel are no different to Mubarak's regime. And a president has yet to be elected. But perhaps the biggest problem is the continuing economic crisis. 50% of Egyptians still live under the poverty line. So what comes next for the Egyptian revolution? For more on this, we're joined by our panel of guests, all of them in Cairo today. Wael Eskandar, a blogger and contributor for Al-Ahram newspaper. Nader Omran, member and co-founder of the Freedom and Justice Party, that's the political party of the Muslim Brotherhood. And Sharif Kouddous, a correspondent for Democracy Now! Welcome to you all. Sharif, we can see behind you that you have Tahrir Square behind you. You've probably been down there, I'm sure. Tell us what the mood is there right now.
Well, it's an absolutely packed day, one of the biggest demonstrations since this revolution began. There are feeder marches coming from working class neighborhoods across Cairo and really in cities across Egypt. People are taking to the streets, I think, to both celebrate and to demonstrate, to remind people that what happened a year ago, what was launched a year ago, succeeded in toppling a dictator 18 days later, but there's still a dictatorship in place, and that is embodied by the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces that has ruled the country for nearly a year now. And what we've seen over the past year is that they have cracked down very severely on dissent, cracked down on protesters. In the past 3 months alone, at least 100 people have been killed. They've put over 12,000 people on military trial. But in the face of that, I think this revolution has turned into a much deeper struggle, a more radical revolution, if you will, against the army, against this really 60-year regime that has been in place in Egypt since 1952. The military enjoys political and economic autonomy in Egypt. And those privileges, I think, are now being targeted. What was once the people in the army are one hand that chant in the 18 days in Tahrir has now become down with military rule. And I really think that's the clarion call of this revolution. And as you can see behind me, hundreds of thousands are in the streets, and this revolution still has a long way to go.
Nader Omran, we hear the talk and the word revolution. I decided before our discussion to look it up in the dictionary. A forcible overthrow of a government in favour of a new system. Do we have a new system yet?
I think not yet. We don't have a new system yet, but we are on the way of forming a new system now. So you know that democracy needs time to be applied, and we have been in dictatorship for more than 60 years now, and it's very difficult to change all that just overnight. So we don't have a new system yet, and the revolution is not finished yet, but meanwhile, the revolution has achieved a lot, and we cannot deny this, at least for the time being.
Wael, also in Cairo, the revolution has achieved a lot. Do you agree with that?
We've only achieved one thing, which is knowledge. The revolution, really what has happened now is that the regime is still the same, but the players have changed. Instead of Mubarak, we have the military, and instead of the NDP to support Mubarak, we have the Freedom and Justice Party to support the military. So I think we've achieved one thing, which is knowledge. We know how deep the corruption goes now. and we haven't been able to really get at the core of it, but we're fighting it.
What do you make of that, Nader Omran? Your party, the Freedom and Justice Party, part of the Muslim Brotherhood, they're described as the new NDP, the new compliant party supporting the existing regime.
That's completely unfair. Yes, we are not new NTP. We are elected by the people in a fair elections. So what is the what the difference? The difference is very big. I mean, there is no even one single something in common between this NDP and FJP. We are elected by the people in a fair elections.
Sharif, as we look at those people, Sharif, as we look at those people behind you in Tahrir Square, there was never going to be a way to satisfy all the people a year ago, was there? Because there were huge expectations, huge anticipation, and most of the people only really agreed on one thing, which was Mubarak had to go. Beyond that, they had so many different views. Sharif.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, there's a big mix of people that are in the square right now that are fighting for different causes, but I think that the struggles continue. In terms of the Muslim Brotherhood, they were elected and have 47% of parliament, but I think it's important to understand that that parliament is actually convening behind walls, 4 walls that were erected by the Supreme Council, and it's almost as if the institutions of government, the parliament, the cabinet, the interior ministry, are on one side, and Tahrir, the epicenter of the revolution, is on the other side. So I think that's very symbolic of where we are right now. And I think to what Wael was talking about, I think what many of the revolutionary youth blamed the Brotherhood for was really not taking a confrontational stance against the Supreme Council, and really only taking to the streets to serve their own interests and not to serve the interests of the revolution. And I think the danger is that if within these next 6 months that are coming up, if they do not stand up to the Supreme Council, which clearly wants to control the constitution writing process and provide a safe exit, then this will really give a green light to increase the already brutal tactics that they're using against dissent here in Egypt.
But Sharif, I want to ask you a question about what you've just said. There were elections and Egyptians across Egypt voted, and isn't it clear from those elections that the people of Tahrir do not represent the people in Cairo and across Egypt?
Well, freedom and social justice and a just society isn't about just elections. What people took to the streets for here was bread, freedom, and social justice. None of these things have been achieved yet, and so I think now that we do have a parliament that's elected, there'll be parliament. There'll still be the streets, which is represented by Tahrir. There'll be the labor movement, which has grown to many hundreds of independent trade unions. There'll be the court system, as we saw an achievement in the case against forced virginity tests just a month ago. So I think all these different aspects will have to be utilized to achieve the demands of this revolution.
Wael, can I ask you, we've seen that gathering taking place in Tahrir Square again. Do you believe there'll be some in that gathering who will want to stay in the square, to sit in again? And how, if that happens, do you think the military will respond?
I think in every big protest there are people who are willing to stay on just because they feel the demands are compelling. And today in Tahrir, I think it's not going to be just a celebration. It's a call for the military to step down, and the concerns are, pretty much legitimate. And I don't know how the military might react, but there is a lot at stake for the Muslim Brotherhood, who have reached the place where they want to be. So I think they will react by actually trying to make the sit-in not happen, if anything at all.
Well, we don't know how the military are going to react, but I want to ask Nader how the Muslim Brotherhood will react, because you represent the political wing of the Muslim Brotherhood. If the military respond, as we've seen before, with violence, with tear gas, how will your party greet that?
Actually, I want to make one thing very clear. Muslim Brotherhood were the first people on 12th of February last year who demanded the military to go back to their barracks as soon as possible. And the people now who are calling for the SCAF to step down are the people who asked the SCAF 1 year ago to stay for 2 years to get ready for elections. So this is a very big dilemma. I cannot understand what's going on now. And about your question about if the military are meeting this with violence, we are not on the side of the SCAF all the time. If he does something wrong, we say it's wrong. If he does something right, we say it's right. So we have no specific position which is for or against. We are just with the right way or the right action of the SCAF.
Now, of course, on the eve of Egypt's revolution, its 1 year anniversary, the head of the ruling military council, Field Marshal Hussein Tantawi, addressed the nation, promising to lift the country's decades-old emergency law and release people who'd been convicted by military trial.
The anniversary of the January 25th revolution will always be a day of unity between the people and their armed forces, who sided with the people, safeguarding the revolution and supporting the revolting youth. And today, after the people have had their voices heard, electing their representatives in the parliament, I have taken a decision to end the state of emergency across the country, with the exception of acts of thuggery. And this decision will come into effect as of the morning of January 25th, 2012.
Well, that military emergency law has been in place, emergency law in Egypt for decades. Sharif, can I ask you, what's the view there in Tahrir about the lifting of the emergency law, or it seems the partial lifting?
Right, I think partial is the key word there. I mean, this is lifting of the emergency law, except in cases of thuggery. And what we've seen over the past year is protesters frequently labeled as thugs and imprisoned in this way. So I think it gives the Supreme Council very large leeway over enacting this law. It really kind of reminds me of Mubarak saying in 2010 that the emergency law would only be applied in drug-related or terrorism cases. And we saw that that really didn't change much on the ground. I think it was an attempt really to try and quell discontent against the Supreme Council, as was the release of nearly 2,000 prisoners who have been jailed in military trials. Well, of course, these moves are welcomed. I think it's clear when they do it on the eve of the anniversary of the revolution what their intention is.
Nader, can I ask you about that lifting of the emergency law, but keeping this provision for thuggery? It's not a very specific offence, is it, thuggery? It's a catch-all offence.
Of course, it's a positive step, even though it's still vague. Why did they decide to do this just on the eve of the revolution, first anniversary? But still, we cannot take all what the SCAF is doing on a negative way. I mean, there might be some good things and bad things. I mean, this, if it's going to be applied really on just thuggery, it's a good thing, and that's what everybody's asking for it for a while now.
Wael, your reaction to that?
Well, yeah, I think thuggery is really a catchphrase there, because the military trials were aimed at people at thuggery as well, and look at how 12,000 people were convicted in or tried in the military courts. So I don't think that this is really a good step. The whole point of the whole speech is lifting emergency law as a catchphrase, which he thinks will appease people. But we know that thuggery means targeting activists, targeting the revolution. And when the Freedom and Justice Party, if they support that, this is an instance where they support SCAF for something that is clearly very wrong with all their history. They've supported and thanked SCAF for their role in the revolution, and they've actually been the counter-revolution. So I think that knowing full well that the military is the counter-revolution, I can't understand why anyone would praise them and say that they have any kind of good intentions towards the revolution.
Nader, your response?
Respect.
Go on, Nader.
No, of course, I condemn what has been said now. We are not lying, and we have records of all what we said before. And I'm not here on this program to hear that Muslim Brotherhood or FGP are lying. You can have your own point of view, your own analysis of the situation, but you cannot just label accusations like this. We are not liars.
OK, Sharif, can I ask you about one of the next things on the horizon, one of the next challenges for Egypt? That trial of Mubarak is underway. It is coming towards an end. How much of a big test is that for the country?
Well, I think it's a very landmark trial on August 3rd. The fact that Mubarak appeared on television in the white overalls of the accused behind bars was really a seminal moment in Egyptian history. And I think the only reason that he was put on trial was because of a massive protest and a sit-in Tahrir that really forced the hand of the Supreme Council to do that. It's important that the trial is conducted in a fair way and that people at the very highest levels of government can be held accountable to serve as a reminder to future governments that all will be held accountable. I think what's a big fear, what many are hoping for, is that the Supreme Council, members of the Supreme Council, are held accountable for the crimes that they have committed over these past few months, for the killing of protesters, for the blinding of protesters, for the jailing and of 12,000 civilians in military trials. So these are key issues that I think that are on the table and ones that everyone is looking to the Muslim Brotherhood, which has such a big piece of parliament, to not allow the Supreme Council this safe exit. They have given indications in the past that they might allow for this to happen, and I think this would upset a lot of people.
Nader, you represent the Muslim Brotherhood and their political wing. Will you provide a check on the judiciary, and will you bring military who've carried out offences, will you bring them to justice too?
Of course, yeah. Nobody is above the law. I mean, we are trying to apply the state of law, so nobody's above the law. Nobody's going to have a special status or something. Yeah, this is for sure. This is, simple logic.
Wael, you listen to the comments of the Freedom and Justice Party. They are the biggest party now in your parliament. When you look at that parliament, which many people say is one of the biggest achievements of the last year, do you think it truly represents the Egyptian people?
There is a representation of people's votes, and I think that the Muslim Brotherhood were popular and they were doing a great deal of activism while they were persecuted during the Mubarak regime. But I don't think the parliament will reflect the different kinds of people. My main concern here is that the Freedom and Justice Party, or the Muslim Brotherhood, they do not operate in a democratic way. So how can you expect an organization that does not itself internally believe in democracy to bring democracy to 80 million people or more? And how do you expect them to put into account every single person, like if they have this majority? The question is, what is their will? What do they want to do with this majority? Will they allow people to participate in this process of transition to democracy or not? Or will they just take control over the parliament? In which case, that's when they'll be exactly like the National Democratic Party.
Nader Omran, can I ask you about that point? Your members have been elected to Parliament. Nearly half the Parliament is your members by democracy, but there's the claim that internally your party is not democratic in the way it conducts business.
I don't know where did this information come from. I mean, did he come to the party and check the democratic elections inside the party? And I don't know. So just people are trying to a process of defamation of FGP. But we don't turn our heads to such a kind of accusations. We are going on the democratic process, both inside the party and outside the party, and in the and the people chose us. And I think we should just look to the future and try to apply the state of law, and we don't have to answer this kind of accusations at all. Yeah.
Sharif, you're there in Tahrir Square. Take a look over your shoulder, if you would, for me. Can you tell me, I guess there are some women there as well as men, probably a large number. What do you make of the fact that only 2% of your parliament's members, your MPs, are women?
Well, I think that it's a major problem that women are half of the population but are still a minority and struggle for minority rights. There's many of the women in Egypt have been the most radical and really leading this revolution. Many people that I know personally have really been at the forefront of the struggle for freedom and social justice here. So their very low representation in parliament is a big problem. I hope it's something that can be remedied in the future. But again, I just want to stress that a just society and freedom is not only achieved through elections and parliament, but there are all these various ways to achieve it. And so, and what many activists are calling for right now actually is an immediate handover of power. Since parliament, many argue, is the only elected body we have in Egypt, many activists are saying, well, what role does the Supreme Council have at all anymore? Why not have Parliament control the remainder of the transitional process? But the Muslim Brotherhood has rejected that and stuck to the SCAF timetable.
Nader, why did your party decide not to force the military to let you form a government? Why is one of your members not now the Prime Minister?
Actually, we have not received the power yet, and we are so much stuck to the constitutional declaration, and we have to do everything in order, and that's the way I think the state of law should be run. I mean, we should not just one day in the morning just we decide to change what the people have chosen. So we are stuck to the constitutional declaration, which is constitution first. We set this constitution, and then we make presidential elections afterwards.
Can I ask you, Wael, that is the policy of the Freedom and Justice Party. Is there a danger in your mind that the public may associate the Freedom and Justice Party with the military in this period of Egyptian history, and it could in the end be damaging for the Muslim Brotherhood?
I think if the Muslim Brotherhood do not take the right side, which is the side of the people, there's a huge danger where people will associate the Freedom and Justice Party to the military in the same way, like I said, the NDP is associated to Mubarak. The challenge that they have right now is actually to be on the side of the people, and so far we haven't had any really meaningful actions or positions from the Muslim Brotherhood that proves this. And this is the reason why so many people think that direct action and going to Tahrir is still the way to do it, rather than an elected parliament that does not represent exactly the will of people who really are aiming for democracy.
Nader, one of the issues that you've got to get hold of very quickly is the economy, isn't it? It's in a desperate state.
Of course, that's we are. I've been saying for a while now. We have to rebuild this country. We have to reconstruct this country, which has been damaged for over 60 years now. We are concentrating on building a state of law, and we begin to solve the problems one by one. And then we said that martyrs' rights are first, and then security, and then economy, and we are working on that. We just been in the parliament for just 2 days ago, so. How could we make it in just 2 days? I mean, and let me just make one thing clear also, that always saying that Muslim Brotherhood are not on the side of the people. Muslim Brotherhood are part of the people, and the people are part of Muslim Brotherhood. We are the same thing. We are the same revolutionaries. So making this difference is not right. I mean, it's not correct.
OK, Sharif, your view on that. The Muslim Brotherhood do have the biggest party now, but does that provide a poison chalice for them, do you think?
A poison chalice in terms of the economy?
Yeah, well, in terms of all the problems your country faces.
Well, I don't know. I think the main issue is will they really stand up to the Supreme Council? I mean, the military has made it very clear what its intentions are. It's made it very clear that it wants secrecy of the military budget and no accountability or oversight. It's made it very clear that it wants to veto parts of the Constitution and provide for it for a safe exit. So I think, as Wael said, the Supreme Council is the counter-revolution right now. And when you have the Parliament Speaker Katatni thanking in a telegram Tutantawi the glorious role of the army in the revolution, it's very worrying to a lot of people about the direction that the Muslim Brotherhood will take this parliament.
OK, Wael, a last point from you. Do you think the military really plan to hand over all power later this year? Quickly, please.
No, I don't think they have any intention of handing power completely. They will always be behind in the shadows. They will always control things. There's too much at stake for them. The economy, control, and I don't think they will really hand power. They've lied to us before, and I think they're lying now.
OK, well, thank you very much. And thanks to all our panel, all of them in Cairo today. Wael Eskandar, Nader Omran and Sharif Kouddous. Our spotlight today was on the most populous country in the Arab world. What do you think about the issue and what should we focus on next? As ever, get in touch. Your thoughts, comments, questions and even complaints all will be read when you email us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks for watching. I'll be back in this seat in 24 hours' time. Bye-bye now.